You touched briefly before, Peter, on an interview technique, and I'm wondering if each of you would be willing to share a little bit of the trend or the type of interview process that your organization is doing, and it might differ from sector to sector, but not only name it, but perhaps describe it for us so we understand what kind of style your interviews are in these days. Laura?
Sure. So let's assume we're at the point where, and this is very similar for our clients as well as us, the telephone interview is a very popular and common use tool. It's a way of taking that first initial screening step into a little bit more detail, and that really is to understand whether someone can effectively communicate their background, their skills, their assets, and the interviewer is really determining whether it's worth investing another hour of time in bringing you in for that additional meeting, whether there's value for both parties. So telephone interviews. On the in-person side, many of our clients still enjoy a panel interview. It's very time efficient. Others are more traditional and starting off with human resources, then the line manager, then a panel interview. What we find, those that are doing separate interviews will usually, the effective ones, will pre-plan on who's covering what. So that the first one may be more an overall background, who are you, how did you get to where you are, followed by the line manager doing more of a technical review, so more in detail your technical skills as it relates to the role. And then usually the final one is a fit one. So that's, again, big picture what we see. Within all the interview styles, behavioral-based questions are here. They've been here for a while. They're not going away. Behavioral-based questions, for those of you who don't know, are really questions designed for you to be able to share specific parts of your background that are very unique to you. So there are questions that would be phrased as follows. Mary Ellen, can you share with me an occasion where you went above and beyond to add value to your team? Or can you share with me an example of the most difficult professional decision you've had to make and why? So they're very specific, and that helps a hiring manager really look at candidate 1, 2, and 3 and understand a bit more about how they make decisions, what they consider to be above and beyond. I always anecdotally say I'm yet to meet, and I've been in this industry of recruiting for 11 years. I've met probably at this point thousands of individuals. I'm yet to meet someone who doesn't have initiative, who doesn't like to work in a team, who's not a team player, and who has a bad attitude, right? So just bear that in mind. All the questions are geared to help interviewers understand what is your understanding and perspective of those different categories.
Thank you. Michael, could you talk a little bit about the interview techniques?
Yeah, pretty much everything that Laura brought out is true, and I've done it different ways depending on the situation. But the key point is coming in and asking some open-ended questions to see how you reply, getting down to specifics. And a lot of times when we have a panel discussion, we have people that will focus on specific skills and capabilities that we're working on and get into the detail. And again, the situation we're looking for there is the individual being able to communicate. And again, I'm boiling down to the SAR process. Tell me the situation, tell me your actions, and tell me your results, and having the candidate come in prepared to react to those type of questions. Just lately, I got kind of stumped on a question where I was asked, "What don't you like about your job?" And I'm sitting there and I'm going, I wasn't prepared for it. But those are some of the questions you get. But again, it was they wanted the reaction to see how you're going to reply to that, and how you're going to communicate that effectively. What you don't like about the job. And I walked out of that interview going, I didn't answer it well. So you have to be prepared from that perspective, and understand that there's some of us that are going to try and trip you up and get you confused, and see how you are from a confidence perspective and how you react and communicate. So, there's a whole palette, and there's all sorts of research on questions and how to ask them, and going in prepared for questions like, what don't you like about the job? Helps. So it's all part of preparation, too, when you come in to approach those questions.
I'm sure most of us have experienced the interview we were going to have, the interview we had, and then the interview we wish we'd had, and I think that covers that quite nicely. Chandra, do you have more to add on that?
As I was listening to what was being said, again, very repetitive, so I don't want to repeat myself, but one of the things that that you've just said, Michael, is about the trip-ups, and you may find that your interviewer spends a lot of time on negative things, asking you what you didn't do well and what have you. And so I think the same rule applies when you're talking about the positives as well as the developmental areas. It's really, you think about, what was the action, what did I do to show initiative, and then what was the outcome, and what did I learn from that? And it's really important that when you're getting those questions, that they're not looking necessarily for you to show that you failed, but they want to know what you took from that and what you learned and how you made it a success, and what you, even if it wasn't a success in that situation, what did you take from it for the next time that scenario came around. So I think if you take that perspective with every question, you really are going in there with some perspective on being able to pull on examples of things that you've done in your past, because that's really where a lot of those behavioral questions are pulling from. Give me an example of what you've done here, and show that, because they're looking for that demonstration of how you can do it in the future, and really then talk about the lessons learned and what you've done to demonstrate that.
Peter?
We use a similar technique. We call it pattern interviewing, asking behavioral questions, put you in situations. One of the things that we assume is that by the time the person's resume arrives on my desk, they've already gone through that first review of, have they met all the basic criteria required? Do they have a degree? Those kind of things. So we assume that everybody that's applied technically are equivalent, and you should assume that as well. So what you need to differentiate yourself on is the answer to these kind of behavioral questions. And they're not to stump you, but it's really to try and pick out who can deal better between all these candidates who are on the surface equal. And we'll ask negative questions in the sense of, a project you're on, if you were a project manager, for example, one that failed. And what we really want you to hear is why it failed, what were the conditions, what you did to help it, sort of thing. But then try to turn it into a positive, what you are able to do to help the customer or the client out of this situation. And so, for example, what do you not like about your job? We kind of always ask that, because it's an answer of saying not just what do you did not like about it, but what did I do about it? And try to turn it into a positive. Try to turn it into something, because IBM's a big company. We got lots of paperwork and bureaucracy, and so everybody could cite, I hate that. But we don't want a bunch of people that hate the paperwork and have to do it. So how do you turn that into a positive? So the idea is to look at these questions, these situations, and I would suggest that you practice. Sit down with not necessarily your friends, because they'll be a bit soft on you, but if you have mentors or you have associations or people that you would sit down with and ask them to ask you these kind of questions, and just go through the gamut of possible questions they might ask, particularly if they're from an industry that maybe you're going to be applying into, and ask them to practice with you, because it's very valuable. You may not get all those questions, but it'll put you at ease, because at least you've given some thought to how to, on the fly, handle some of these questions, which might be quite typical for the employer, but might be totally off guard for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And they have each other. You all have your fellow IEPs to be drilling and practicing with each other. I've asked a handful of questions here, and kind of in a broad spectrum, but I'm wondering if our two student runners with their microphones are fantastic. So we have Nandan and Tracy, both accounting students here at York University, and they're going to be our runners with the microphone, and I'd love the opportunity to open the floor to our guests, and also some of our employers. You might actually have a comment or that you'd like to add to what you've heard here, and the opportunity to get questions. So if you have a question you'd like to ask, would you like to put up your hand and we'll find you? There's one question. I know there is. There he is. There. Thank you. And please tell us who you are and the program that what part of the IEP program that you're in right now.
Yeah, I'm Leo. I'm in the IT stream now. I'm new to this program, like most of us here. My question is, when you do get tripped up in an interview, especially like in the first or second question. What do you do about it? I mean, how do you kind of recover from it? Or can you also recover from it after the interview?
Can you give us a few strategies you might suggest? Michael's really anxious to answer that question.
One of the keys is after you've had an interview and you go through the before, the during, and the after, and you reflect on what happened, you always have the thank you note that you send back thanking the people for their time, and that should be key. And at that point in time, you make a comment, hey, I don't feel like I answered this question that well. Here's what I should have said, you know, or, you know, explain yourself and try and explain better. So you have that last option once you've gone through and assessed your performance to kind of recover.
Yeah.
And put positive spin on it if it didn't turn out well for you.
Sure. I would just even add in, Leo, if any of you are in a situation where you're aware, you know, as the words are falling out your mouth, that this is going the wrong way, it's okay. You know, employers are looking for real people, right? We all make mistakes. We all say the wrong thing sometimes. That I've hired many people whose first part of the interview was horrible, right? Because through discussion, you know, if you're able to say, you know, can I do a do-over? Can I start that answer again? Or can I have a few moments? Or could we come back to that question at the end? I have something I want to share. I have just the clarity of the thoughts not with me. Could we come back? I always say, you've worked so hard to get to that interview room, right? Usually you've been one of hundreds in a pile of resumes. You've gone through maybe initial 1, 2, 3 telephone calls or interviews. Take your time, breathe, and don't be afraid to say, you know what, can I do it over?
Chandra?
Oh, I was going to say the same thing. I think it's all right to ask for a pause. If you get stumped on a question, you can ask for a pause. I mean, obviously there's a time frame where you don't want it to go too long, but really it's not a race. I mean, if that person is investing time in the interview, you're investing time to have come there. There's an opportunity there where both of you are talking to each other and getting to know each other. So if something does come up where you need some time to reflect, absolutely ask for that pause. You know, take your moment, or ask to go back to the question and then continue on from there. Happens all the time, and it's not a huge deal breaker. So
I think, as Chandra said, just pause to listen, think about the question to answer. Another tactic that puts at ease, because the interviewer's probably been interviewing a lot of people, is a bit of humor. You can say, this is not going the way I wanted it to go, and start over, or ask for that, let me come back to this, or say, I'd like to give that more serious thought. Another little tactic is to ask a question back for clarification, or, is this what you meant or asked? Because that just gives you, a little bit of time to frame another question or another answer to the person. But we are looking for humans. We're not looking, and we recognize people, you're nervous, and maybe there's a lot riding here, and we're sensitive to that. So the interview is not supposed to put you on pins and needles and terrorize you. The interview is really supposed to try to get information out of you so that we can make a decision. Are you the right fit? So it's all right to say that was the wrong answer, or let me start again, or I think I might have misinterpreted what you said. It's all right to do that. Don't feel that the person sitting before you is a god. We're certainly not, and we're really trying to ascertain what you're going to bring to us. And honesty and a bit of humor can go a long way. If you don't know the answer to a question, don't try to bluff it. Just say, I don't know that, or my experience hasn't brought me there. Rather than leave it hanging, try to give something that would say, but I have something comparable, so you can get it back onto that positive track again. So you might, if someone says, have you done Java programming, and you've not, you can say, no, but I've done a lot of object-oriented programming, and I've taken some courses, and I feel quite confident I can learn this because I've learned these things. So you always try to turn those things, if you make a little mistake or a little trip, turn them into a positive.